Good day, everyone. You are welcome to this economics class. Today we are going to be treating price legislation. Price legislation. Before we go straight into price legislation, I would want us to know what happens in a free market. In a free market, prices are determined by the forces of demand and supply. This is the illustration. We have our price here, we have quantity here. So the demand curve is like this, it slopes downward from left to right. And of course you know that the supply curve slopes upward from left to right. So this is the force of demand and the force of supply. Where they meet is the point of equilibrium, and a price is established which is called the equilibrium price. And then we have the equilibrium quantity. Now, this price you are seeing may not be favorable to consumers, and it may not be favorable to producers. So the government comes in now to either fix the price above this price or below this price, to either favor the consumer or to favor the producer. That is what we refer to as what now? Price legislation. Now, what is price legislation? Price legislation is the fixing of prices of essential commodities by the government or its agencies. There's the government coming in now to fix prices now. Now, price legislation is divided into two. We're going to talk about two types of price legislation. You have the minimum price legislation, or what we call the price floor. And then the next one is the maximum price legislation, or what we call the price ceiling. We are going to discuss them in turn. We will start with the first one, which is the minimum price legislation. Minimum price legislation. Now, many a times in the society, the prices of goods may not be favorable to producers, and the producers will complain that the prices are not good, and then the government will now step in now to fix the price in order to favor producers. When the government does that, it is called minimum price legislation. So minimum price legislation is the fixing of prices above the equilibrium price. Now, this is the equilibrium price. The government comes in now to fix the price above the equilibrium to favor who now? The producer. That is minimum price legislation, to protect the producer. In this case now, the consumers have to pay high prices because the government has set a floor so that price cannot go beneath. If this is the equilibrium price, the government can set the price here P2, so that the price in the market will not be P2, which is above the equilibrium. Now, what are the advantages of this policy now? Let's look at the advantage of this policy. Whenever the government comes to set price above the equilibrium, it stimulates excess supply. It means more of that goods will be produced. More producers will come in and will produce a lot of these goods. So we'll have excess of the goods in the market. Look at it now. Look at the board. For example, if the government decides to set the price to P2, now the demand will fall and then the supply will increase. So we'll now have excess supply. Excess supply. So more of the goods in the market, and then the demand will fall. So the demand may fall to Q0 and supply will rise to Q2. So we have excess supply in the market. The second advantage again is it discourages hoarding. Those middlemen that will buy goods and hide, or producers that will produce goods and hide, will no longer do that. They will release the goods to the market because there is excess in the market. So there's no point hiding the commodity in order to sell at higher worth now, or to create artificial scarcity. And then the third one is it discourages conditional sale. What is conditional sale? Sometimes consumers are made to buy what they don't want in addition to what they want. So because the goods are much in the market, that issue of conditional sale will disappear, because there is no need forcing somebody to buy a commodity which he does not want in addition to what he wants. So there will be no conditional sale. The fourth one is there will be no queue. Since there is excess, no queue. Nobody will still on the queue for a long time before acquiring the commodity. So there will be no queue in the market. When you go to the shop, to the producer, you easily get what you want because the goods are in what? Excess. There will be no rationing. What's rationing? The supplier will not fix a particular quantity to be sold to a particular consumer. No. Whatever quantity the consumer wants, he will get because the goods are in excess. So no rationing. Whatever quantity you want, you will get because of this policy. Now there will be no preferential treatment. Customers and others will be treated equally. So nobody will be given special treatment because the goods are enough to go around for everybody. So no preferential treatment when price legislation is put in place. Now, parallel market or under-the-counter sales will disappear. Things like black market. There's no point selling goods in black market because the goods are much in number. So there will be no parallel market or issue of black market will disappear from the market. Now, what are the disadvantages now of price legislation? When the government sets price above the equilibrium, there are also disadvantages. Let's look at the disadvantages. One, it creates exploitation of the consumer. The consumer is now buying the goods at higher prices. So the consumer is now exploited. Because in this price policy, the consumer pays the price because they have to pay higher prices for the goods and services. So the consumers are exploited. Now it causes inflation. What's inflation? The continuous increase in the general price of goods and what now? Services. Now you see the goods keep rising. So this policy causes what now? Inflation. Now low income earners will suffer. Those who earn low income will suffer because their incomes will not be enough to buy the goods at the current price set by the government. So those whose incomes are less will be at the receiving end here. Now, it will be difficult to control the profit of monopoly. Yes, the monopolist is a single producer that can decide to charge high price. Now, if the government sets minimum price, the monopolist can be charging high price for how to maximize profit. And it will be very difficult for the government to control the profit of the monopoly. Because the monopolist is always a price giver. He sets the price and will always want to charge high price in order to make more profits. Now, it accumulates deficit for the government. The government gets deficit because when there is minimum price, the price is high now. Demand is less. Supply is more. So because demand is less, the government gets less money as tax. And the excess here is always bought by the government. So the government has to be spending more in order to acquire the excess of these goods. If not, they will get spoiled. Take for example, let's say milk producers now. Milk producers are crying that the price of milk is less. And the government decided to say, okay, let me help milk producers, and they increase the price of milk to this level. What will happen is there will be excess of milk production and then less demand. So the excess will be bought by the government, and then the government has to spend more, resulting to what? A deficit. And the government gets less tax because of low demand. Now, it causes fluctuations of prices, especially in agricultural produce. Prices will be going up and down, will fluctuate, and which is not too good for farmers, especially when they want to plant. Now, it destabilizes the income of producers, especially farmers. Once the price fluctuates, the income will not be stable. So the farmer finds it difficult to even plan for future output. So it destabilizes the income of producers. The income will not be constant to the producers. Now, let's look at the maximum price legislation, which is the other type of price legislation. Here, the government tries to protect who now? The consumers. If the consumers complain that the price of goods in the market are too high, the government comes in now to now bring down the price below the equilibrium. Now the government is trying to protect the consumers. So, maximum price legislation is the fixing of price below the equilibrium price now. Below the equilibrium price in order to protect the consumers, in order to favor the consumers. So if this is the minimum price and the government has to fix a price here, P2, look at it, the consumers have to pay P2. So the consumer is being favored here, not the supplier. When it is P3, not P2. When it is P2, the government favors the supplier. When it is P3, the government is favoring now the consumer. Now, let's look at the advantages of this price legislation to prevent exploitation of consumers. In order to prevent the producers from exploiting the consumers, the government comes into play to set a price ceiling. They place a ceiling so that price cannot go beyond that ceiling. So the consumers are being protected, not to be exploited. Now, to control inflation, yes, the government sets price legislation to control inflation, especially maximum price legislation. Now, if the price tries to go up, already the government has said no price should go beyond P3. So that controls inflation. It helps low-income earners. Of course, from the diagram on the board, the low-income earners will enjoy because they have to pay low price for the particular commodity, so they can get more of that commodities in the market. Now, to control the profit of companies, especially monopoly. The monopolies, like I said earlier, is fond of increasing prices in order to maximize profit. Now, whenever the government wants to control this monopoly, they now place a ceiling so that the monopolies cannot charge price above that ceiling, which is the maximum price legislation. And that helps to control the profits of monopoly. Now, to prevent fluctuations of prices. Fluctuations of prices are not too good, especially for agricultural produce, because farmers want stable income so that they can plan. So the government now sets price or fix a price ceiling so that there will be no fluctuation, wide fluctuation of what now prices of goods and what now services. It also stabilizes income of some producers, especially farmers. Now, once there is no fluctuation in prices, it means the producers are expecting a stable income, and by that they can plan easily. So it stabilizes income of some producers, especially farmers. Number 7, to make possible planning for future output. Like I said, when your income is constant, you can easily plan. So once there is no price fluctuation and the incomes are stable, farmers can easily plan, or producers can easily plan for future output, for the amount of goods and services they want to produce in future. So that helps in future planning. Now, to accumulate surplus for the government. Once there is maximum price legislation, it means more goods will be bought by consumers, and so the government accumulates surplus through tax, and then the government spends less because they don't need to buy any excess from the producer. The next thing is, let's look at the disadvantages of maximum price legislation. When the government sets price below the equilibrium, do we have disadvantages? Yes. What happens? There will be excess demand. Look at it. When the price is P3, this is the supply curve, this is the demand curve. When the price is P3, it means the supply will now fall from Q1 to Q2, and then the demand will increase from Q1 to Q3. So there will be excess of something there, excess of demand. So more demand in the market and less supply, so there will be shortage. People want more commodities, but less is being supplied. So there will be excess of demand over supply. So the country stands the risk of running into shortage whenever there is a maximum price legislation. The next one is it encourages hoarding, like I said earlier, because the price is too low for producers. They will hide these goods now in order to create artificial scarcity so they can sell them at higher price in future. So the producers will become crafty to hide these goods in order to sell at higher price in future. So hoarding is encouraged when there is maximum price legislation. Now, it leads to the creation of parallel market or under-the-counter market, meaning black market will begin to emerge. People begin to, you see the goods disappearing in the open market because the price is too low. The producers don't want it. They begin to sell the goods in black market or in secret. So you will not see the goods in the open market. That's another problem of fixing price below the equilibrium. The next one is it encourages conditional sale. This one is practiced in a lot of places where, because there is excess demand and less supply, so whenever consumers come to buy goods, the supplier will now force the consumer to buy another commodity in addition to what the consumer wants to buy, which is called conditional sale. So it means if you go to a shop and you want to buy things, maybe you want to buy a specific commodity, let's say like a television. Now the supplier will say, okay, in order to sell this television, you have to buy something in addition, which is a conditional what now sale, so that the two goods can be sold to you at the same time. So it encourages conditional sale. It results to queue. Yes. Look at the board very well. We have excess demand. This is the supply, this demand. It means the goods are few in the market and there are many people to buy the goods. So you have to stand on queue for a long period of time before you can get the commodity. So queue will be another problem that will occur. Then it leads to rationing. Rationing means the amount of commodity the consumer wants to buy, he cannot get because the goods are not much. So the supplier begins to fix the quantity of goods to be sold to each consumer. That's what they call rationing. Then the second one is it leads to preferential treatment. Since the goods are not much in the market and there are many buyers, so what the producers will start doing is they will start choosing who to sell to and who to sell to, who to sell more to and who to sell less to. And that's what we call preferential treatment. So preferential treatment in this market will emerge. By that, we have come to the end of this lesson. Next time, before we meet, I want you to take time to study revenue, which is a very important concept in economics that will help us in our next topic. Thank you and God bless.